Blue dragons flew over the mountains. The girl stood with her hand raised, looking peaceful. Looking at her, a bright light began to emanate from the guy. The observers were delighted with this picture. Apollo tried so hard to do everything right it shows on his face. Taking out his weapon, he swung it with all his might. And he hit, shouting at the top of his voice. The impact created a bright glow, causing everyone to try to take cover. This light gave strength and inspired. A small village appeared, where adults worked hard and children frolicked. Standing in front of the statue with scales, holding a hammer in his hands, the main character had hope that maybe today would work out. Suddenly, the scales of magic will tip in his favor, and he swung again, the blow accompanied by a scream. The scales haven't tipped a millimeter. The guy sat down on the ground, disappointment evident in him. But also anger at myself, why it didn't work out again. He wondered why he still didn't have magic. The headman appeared in front of Apollo. The boy tried to apologize to him. The headman said that he was tired of seeing the scales without movement. One still has to try hard to achieve that. Pointing his finger at him, the old man said that this year's test was his last chance. He was angry, saying that if the hero failed, he would be banished from the village. And he left, leaving Apollo sitting on the ground, whining and hanging his head, while the rest of the village passed by and laughed at him. Taking his will into a fist and directing it into the hammer, the protagonist again began to try to achieve a shift in the scales. But they stood motionless, and did not even intend to change their position in any way. Those who are powerful enough to break the laws of physics and perform miracles are called magicians. Since the founding of the empire, large-scale tests of magical powers have been held annually. Anyone who passes them will be recognized as a magician, and the magician who is above all is second only to the emperor. Villages that produce great mages receive various benefits, such as tax exemptions. The birth of a great mage will raise the status of the village, and its inhabitants will live in comfort. As Apollo struck the hammer once again, he knew that if he failed the test, he would be expelled from the village. He knew that those who did not possess magic were absolutely useless. Against the backdrop of the beautiful statue, the sounds of the boy's attempts to increase his strength could be heard. A smiling girl approached him, and insisted that he was putting too much pressure on himself. While Apollo sat down to rest, Luna sat down next to him and tried to explain that he would be tired before the real test. Clenching her hand into a fist, the girl was inspired that the guy would succeed. Tried to encourage Apollo that he was capable of amazing magic. When he started to say the opposite again, Luna looked him straight in the eyes. She kept repeating that she was sure the hero could do it. He could do everything. Remembering how Apollo saved her back then, they were quickly running away from someone. Luna was scared to tears. Suddenly we reached a cliff. There was no further way. A mad animal was chasing them behind. And although Apollo himself was very scared, he had to save the moon. The enraged beast with furious eyes looked straight at the children. It was as if there was no longer any hope left in Luna's eyes for a good outcome. Beads of sweat rolled down the protagonist's face. He had many thoughts about how to get out of this. He was in a good mood that day because the headman was teaching a magic lesson. Apollo listened to him attentively, but Luna wasn't particularly interested. The hero already wanted to impress the girls. He thought that he had magic. Having broken the rules and gone into the forest, as the headman said, the boys were attacked by a monster. He could eat them alive, which is what he seemed to be planning to do. But suddenly something lit up, and the beast began to fall. For some unknown reason they were saved. It seemed as if the monster had been carried away by someone's magical power, and the boys stood there in bewilderment. Then Luna decided that it was Apollo who saved her. When the adults arrived, the girl continued to repeat that it was Apollo who saved them. He was a great magician. That's why even now she knew that the guy had unique abilities. She kept saying that she was sure he would become a great magician. After asking to wait a minute, Luna began to cast a spell, and butterflies began to fly in her hands. It was a small spell to help the hero heal the blisters on his palms. Now his hand was covered in bright glowing butterflies. While bandaging the main character's hand, the girl suggested moving to another village, according to the village headman. Looking up at the sky, Apollo replied that he would have to leave one day if he failed the test. Luna was surprised and burst into a scream. How could he, so to speak? In her emotions, she jumped up and ran to the headman, wanting to say a few kind words to him. The hero was left alone, already regretting that he had said too much. He looked at his bandaged palm and thought, I needed to try harder, so I took up the handle of my weapon again. So he trained until the night. The last blows came hard. There were also some indignant people who asked how long this would continue, since it was already night outside. Then Apollo swung his hammer one last time. It hit the surface with a distinctive ringing sound, and part of it flew off, leaving only the handle in the guy's hand. He jumped back a few steps from the guy. The hero was disappointed with this outcome of events. The guy started in surprise. Someone picked up the sledgehammer and was very surprised. After so many attempts, there was no trace of magic. Apollo did not recognize this grinning man in a long red cloak. The main character looked up at him from the bottom, sitting on his knees. I thought that I hadn't seen him before, which meant he wasn't from this village. The man towered over him, smoke swirling around him. He asked the hero to extend his hand. Apollo fulfilled his request. The man looked closely, scratching his beard. He smiled, saying that it was unusual. The level of emptiness was really strange. Hearing this, the main character could not believe it. He looked at his hand again, wondering how and why he had no magic. All those attempts, all those efforts that were made to tip the scales. Everything turned out to be in vain, just as the guy's eyes were now empty. He fell to his knees and began to lament that he knew it. Already on all fours, he asked if there was really no hope, if all the hard work had been in vain. The man raised his hand and replied that although he had no magical powers, his vessel was a miracle. It's a real miracle. He honed it incredibly well and without any magic. Then the hero looked at the man with hope. He threw his hand back at Apollo and asked him to wake up. He must believe in his own strength. The two of them stood surrounded by forest and illuminated by bright light. Then the old man took the hero by the hand and pulled it up. He asked to stretch his hand even further and asked about that tree. Suddenly, Apollo felt something inside and a stream of energy came through his outstretched hand. A magical symbol was formed. The guy started doing magic without even realizing it. The tree quickly burst into flames. A moment later, only a stump remained in its place. Apollo was shocked that he did this, and the person standing next to him confirmed his visions. The guy was already looking with inspiration at the hand that had just done this. This man offered to teach the main character how to use his physical strength. However, he was very angry that the guy only managed to produce a normal flame on the 10th try. He explained that physical strength could be considered incredible because it could be used to invoke magic. Apollo was beaming with happiness. He could finally use magic. Stopping the hero's thoughts about training, the man suggested a faster way. He showed the guy his unique purple physical power. It started from his finger and circled around it several times. The man made the call in this way: summon a goblin who was ill-disposed. Apollo saw him and was surprised at how huge he was. The man corrected him, saying that he was a respected goblin magician. The eyes of this goblin were fiercely directed at the protagonist. He directed a wave of fire straight at the guy. At that very moment, Apollo's frantic cry was heard. He tried to take cover from the fire. At that time, the old man smiled and waited for the boy's further actions. The whole body was burning. If this continues, only ashes will remain of the hero. But suddenly, Apollo's body seemed to be enveloped in protection. The flame began to fade. The hero did not expect this. The man asked the protagonist if he felt his physical strength flowing through his veins. A symbol appeared on Apollo's palm. The guy couldn't believe it was he who had absorbed the fire. The old man explained that his magic was at 0. But he asked not to lose heart. It is simply necessary to absorb more and more. Apollo realized that he was absorbing magical power and accumulating physical power, which gave him the strength to move forward. And although the method is certainly risky, it must be used. He will just continue to absorb magical power. The man sat and said that he hadn't met anyone like him for 10 years. Apollo listened to him, but suddenly a scream was heard from behind. It was Luna. She saw the explosion from afar and was very worried, but seeing that the guy was okay, she calmed down. When the hero pointed to the old man, saying that he had trained with him, there was no one else in that place. It was strange, because a second ago he was here. The girl thought that the main character hit his head. The next day, Apollo came back to his place to train. Luna was not happy with the words of the headman, who repeated that if the power was at 0, he would be expelled. When she tried to prove something to the headman, Apollo stopped her. She believed in the hero and looked with hope. Apollo gathered his courage and decided to show his abilities. Luna's expectations were confirmed. She was very happy, but the headman simply stood there in a stupor. The guy was focused on his work. He took the hammer, swung it, and struck. The statue began to sparkle with yellow light, and it flew apart in different directions. The headman could not come to his senses from this. The girl rejoiced, congratulating the hero, saying that he had succeeded. She threw herself into his arms, repeating over and over again that Apollo was a great guy. The headman was very angry and shouted what the guy had done with the measuring device. He must have cheated. The hero tried to prove that this was not true. Luna believed everything he said. The next day, representatives from Tepoi arrived to sort out the situation. The repair promised to take a long time, so they decided to use other equipment. The headman was sarcastic, saying that the hero would definitely not deceive the representatives, and that it would be impossible to cheat. The elder had no doubt that Apollo would be expelled, but the representatives stood and watched these disputes. The hero did not wait long. He took it and struck with this weapon. But even now his power has gone beyond its limits. The representatives thought it was incredible. The power was on a completely different level. It was truly a miracle. The girl's happiness knew no bounds. The hero cried out in surprise, and the representatives suddenly fell to their knees before him. One of them said that he had amazing power, and asked if it was possible to know his name. The hero was not prepared for this, but he gave his name. With such strong magic, isn't Apollo above the representatives in status? The guy couldn't believe what he heard. The representative asked to go straight to the capital. A carriage would be sent for him tomorrow. Of course, Apollo quickly agreed. He turned around to look at the people standing behind him. Luna was also there. She admired the guy. It was a dark night, and there was a mill in the middle of the field. The main character was resting in it. He couldn't bring many things, and there wasn't much to take. Having noticed some fabric, he decided that he could grab it. This is the one that was bandaged around his palm. It was the only thing that meant anything to him. Memories of the past came flooding back and a blush ran across my face. Suddenly the door opened slightly. It turned out to be the headman. Under Luna's supervision, he reluctantly began to speak. She was angry and asked Apollo to be careful, because the old man wanted to ask him to tell that he was from this village. Apollo listened in surprise, as the village elder replied that there was nothing wrong with remembering the village in which he grew up. Luna was categorical and asked the guy to give up everything. Then the headman fell on his knees and began to pray to Apollo. The guy played the fool and said that since Luna says no, then so be it. Soon the old man was outside the door, still continuing to ask. But no one was going to open the door for him. Apollo thanked Luna for her support. She replied that she would take him home tomorrow. The guy was surprised. It was quiet outside, but conversations could be heard inside. They talked about Apollo's departure. The girl said that the guy has a lot of strength, and he definitely deserves it. The hero looked into her eyes with great gratitude. She had already gotten up to leave because the guy needed to rest before tomorrow. She stood in front of the door for a few more minutes. I thought that this is how they part. In the morning, the coachman drove up to the appointed place. A small red carpet was laid out in front of the guy. Apollo was told to move when he was ready. Luna forced a smile and said goodbye to the main character. She asked to write to her sometimes. The guy also looked at her. He handed her a handkerchief. The same one, it had already become frayed. But Apollo said that he didn't need anything new. Taking her hand in his, he asked her to go with him. Luna was incredibly happy at that moment. The guy said he wanted Luna to be with him. The girl was overcome with heat from her own thoughts, how his words sounded. She sat down on her back with joy and naturally agreed to go with him. Apollo took Luna's hand and they set off together. The beautiful city of Tepoi, through which a wide river flowed. The cart started moving through this area. Luna and Apollo rode together and listened to why there was such a noise outside. The girl looked out with interest. She started screaming in surprise. It was unclear why a crowd of people greeted them and bowed. And everyone did this without exception. Everyone made way for the carriage, all because the main character was riding in it. Apollo and Luna were puzzled as to why this was happening. The guy suggested that maybe someone important was following them. The representative replied that this was their way of showing him respect, since Apollo was higher in status. The girl's eyes lit up at this news. The representative added that the rhythm the coachman beats reflects the status of the passenger. A double knock signifies someone at the level of the mayor. If you meet someone of higher status, it would be polite to give up the expensive fare. Apollo never thought that people would start treating him like this. When the girls saw him, they squealed and said that this was their chance to marry a rich man. Luna, hearing this, immediately frowned. She pouted and explained to the oblivious guy that they were trying to hit on him. With such conversations, they drove on. We arrived at the Tepa administration. We went inside and saw the Institute of Magical Research. Apollo was interested in everything, so he was directed to follow everyone. The representatives were going to measure its strength with the help of this giant. The hero exhaled and took a pose to begin his work. The concentration of magic grew rapidly, even very quickly. Luna was very worried and asked what they could hear there. The observers themselves could not understand what was happening. They understood that this could not happen. It turned out that the main character broke everything again. The spokesman said there was another rhythm he didn't mention, a 5-beat rhythm. The rhythm was meant for a great magician, and the guy's eyes showed incomprehension. He asked him again what he meant. They answered him that Apollo was a great magician, but perhaps his magic exceeded that. Luna jumped up in delight. She said how wonderful it was. Great magician. Apollo wondered if he was a great magician. The same group moved to the reception area. Apollo and Luna enjoyed the treats. The representative asked to wait here until the mayor returned. He would probably want to discuss what to do next. In the meantime, the guy was given 1,000. While he was in the city, it would pay for everything. Another replied that it was a fitting reward for Apollo's magical abilities. Luna and Apollo exchanged glances in anticipation of what they would be able to buy. Having thanked for such a gift, they went out into the fresh air. The hero was already walking with full shopping bags. Luna told Apollo that she was hungry, and here they are standing in front of the establishment. The girl's eyes widened. The place didn't look cheap. But they didn't care about it, because there was this card. They were offered a table for two, and Apollo handed over his card to pay. The staff replied that everything would be prepared and invited them to the VIP room. Luna wondered what they would expect in such a room. The guy was once again convinced that this card was really something. The girl hovered over the hero and said that it was all thanks to his powers. She was glowing with happiness. There was a notice on the wall about recruiting students for the School of Suffering. The staff asked if they wanted to become apprentices. He added that powerful magic is stored within the walls of the dojo, inaccessible from the outside. Suddenly Apollo felt a sharp pain in his chest. He was horrified by this. Luna immediately began asking what happened, to which he replied, "Nothing to worry about." They were asked to go into the room. Climbing the stairs, the hero realized that nothing hurt anymore. Maybe he imagined it. The view from the window was stunning. The moon was stunned by this night city. Apollo was also delighted, not knowing what to say. At that moment they held hands. The girl told the hero that he was wonderful. "And now I wanted to add something else." The guy waited impatiently for her words, but Luna chickened out and covered her eyes with her palms, realizing that she had barely confessed. While she was thinking about what had happened, the hero felt that the pain in his chest had completely gone away. He suggested that it might be because of the moon. There was a luxurious table that had been prepared for them. It was filled with exquisite dishes. After all, they ordered the entire menu at once, but now they themselves were shocked by the quantity. Luna's mouth was already watering as she pulled the food to her mouth. But then someone pulled them away from their meal. It was Mr. Payne. They tried to stop him, saying that he couldn't go there. But he didn't care. A minute later, he was already standing in front of the guys. The gentleman angrily asked what backwater the hero was from, and claimed that this was his place. He did not understand how he dared to take the place of the master of the School of Suffering. Payne mentioned the School of Suffering, those same dojo classes, and he promised to teach the villagers a lesson. Apollo was not very happy about this event. Mr. Payne repeated again that he would show who was boss here. The protagonist's eyes flashed with anger, and again he felt the same pain. Luna came up to him, wanted to help with something, but didn't know how. Payne started screaming that this was no place for freaks like him. He swung and swept away everything that was on the table, almost hitting the moon. He was incredibly angry at these two. His shadow loomed over the frightened girl sitting on the floor. Apollo was worried about her, but he couldn't do anything yet. He sat there wincing in pain. Luna was not going to give up. She proved that they were brought here. What did he want from them? The staff has already apologized to Mr. Payne. He also apologized to Luna, saying that he would prepare another place for them. The gentleman didn't care about these apologies. He believed that they wouldn't fix anything, and he decided to show his strength to those present. Payne wanted to direct the mania towards them, while they figured out what was going on with Apollo. He was determined to destroy the protagonist. That's why I started to accumulate energy, and he hit her, but not Apollo. The man who was serving the boys flew into the wall. The gentleman shouted at how he had the audacity to ignore the master. He took the girl by the hand like a doll and pulled it up. The protagonist's eyes filled with tears. Luna could no longer rub the pain, she cried. Then Apollo, through the pain, began to try to do at least something. He asked to take his hands off the girl and concentrated on the magic inside himself, pointed it towards Payne. He flew away from such a wave. He broke through the ceiling and went far up. Apollo was surrounded by a frantic energy that sent his opponent further and further away. The guy continued to sit in this position until Payne's outline disappeared from his field of vision. He immediately approached Luna and asked if she was okay, and the girl replied that thanks to him, yes, she was. And although he himself didn't really understand how he did it, he was pleased to hear it. He was glad that he was able to protect the girl, so he hugged her tightly, and she hugged him back. The roof of the building now had a hole in it from the gentleman who had flown by. Through it, you could see the boys sitting opposite each other. The protagonist looked at his hand, trying to comprehend what he had just done. Luna took his hand, continuing to repeat that Apollo was so cool. He decided to repeat this trick again. He held out his hand, hoping that everything would work out again. But nothing came of it. Luna looked at him with regret. The hero asked the moon for forgiveness because he would not be able to repeat it. She said that he had just started learning magic, and that sometimes things like that happen. The guy tried to believe it, although he had doubts. The staff was cleaning up after all this chaos. The boys accepted the apology for their meal being interrupted. They also asked her to leave here quickly. The girl was unhappy with these words. After all, if they find out about the commotion with the master, his students from school might come to sort things out. Apollo and Luna exchanged glances, both frightened by this news. Therefore, they decided to quickly retreat from this event. But Payne was already rushing after them, along with his students. He said that he would never forgive them. He called them scoundrels. He claimed to be a master of the school of suffering, who could turn everything upside down with one word. Luna hid behind the main character, she whispered. Apollo's abilities were finally recognized, and now it is unknown what will happen. The two of them against the ferocious crowd. But the guy wasn't going to show his fear to his opponents. He said that he and Luna had worked hard to get here, and he will never allow all this to be destroyed. Pain laughed. Was he really still going to go against him? He announced that it was time for Apollo to be disgraced. The hero did not react to his words and stood ready to repel the attack. He stretched out his hand and tried to remember the sensations he had experienced during their first duel, and it seems he succeeded. Magic was directed from Apollo towards his opponent. Mr. Pain stood up, preparing to strike back, but Apollo's energy proved stronger than Pain's magic. He fell to the ground with a dull thud. Satisfied with his work, the hero said that he would not allow anyone to offend the moon. Luna herself was fascinated by this picture and the guy's words. Pain, sitting in front of Apollo, still couldn't understand how the redneck was capable of such a thing. The fire of hatred for this man has not yet died out in the hero's eyes. Pain tried to restrain himself from howling in pain. As he gathered his energy for the attack again, Apollo added that he wasn't finished yet. The girl watched all this silently, but the moment he directed his magic at the master, Luna stood between them, and she took the blow herself. Apollo didn't understand what was happening, why the girl was doing this. Luna covered Pain with herself and stood with her arms outstretched. The guy replied that the guy was a scoundrel and he deserved it. The gentleman was lying on the floor groaning in pain. His students were trying to help him. Luna tried to convince the protagonist that she could become a killer because of someone like him. But she doesn't want that. Then Apollo decided that if the girl wanted it, then so be it. It was night, and some windows still had lights on. The main character sat, immersed in his thoughts. He looked at his palm once again. Decided to try using my power again. The guy tried very hard, trying to concentrate only on this. But no matter how hard he focused, nothing worked. He knew that he and Luna had worked so hard to get here. He couldn't just stop. I couldn't afford to ruin everything. Angry at myself and at this situation, I began to gather my energy again. He remembered how his hand had lit up with different colors the last time, and he could use his magic. But now nothing was working. The question was why. Luna entered his room. Apollo was glad to see her and asked how she was feeling. She replied that it was fine, with a completely calm look. The girl was telling me about Pain. His students took him away, so he will be okay. But the hero understood that in addition to this, they had caused damage to the restaurant, and Luna was not blamed for this. He didn't care at all how Mr. Pain was doing. He was only worried that no one would say anything unnecessary to Luna. Luna, beaming with relief, happily informs Apollo that she is completely fine and notes that the guild staff have been helpful. Apollo, slightly embarrassed by her joy, says that it is nice to hear that. They threw their bags on the bed, and Luna, gesturing enthusiastically suggests the option Excalibur. However, the delight gives way to slight disappointment when Apollo explains that he cannot yet control his power. Luna listens to him with a soft, understanding smile, giving him the opportunity to speak out and share his experiences. The guy shyly admits that strength appears to him, it would seem, at the most necessary moments, especially when he wants to protect her. Apollo, looking a little embarrassed, suggests that his uncontrollable power awakens as he strives to save Luna. Luna, hearing his words, freezes, her eyes closed in surprise. Asking again in a whisper and not believing her ears, Luna tries to understand what exactly she means to him. Apollo, meeting her gaze and seeing her reaction, himself realizes the full depth of his words. Luna, noticing that Apollo continues to look at her flushed face, looks away in embarrassment, trying to deny her embarrassment. To quickly change the subject, Apollo begins to fuss, suggesting that the girl rest, removing all the bags from the bed. Luna admits with a smile and a little shame that she lied to hide her embarrassment, and is touched by how easily Apollo believed her. The moon was fast asleep. Apollo is in his room, his face illuminated by the moonlight, his eyes reflecting deep thought as he analyzes recent events. He looks with determination and quietly pronounces a key discovery for himself. His power is awakened by a sincere desire to protect the moon. The boy looked at the moon. His previous confusion was replaced by calm confidence. He fully accepted the nature of his power. While Apollo was pondering all this, Luna was quietly snoring in bed. The guy extended his hand forward. He was ready to protect the girl at any moment. Waking up, Luna sleepily mutters a morning greeting to herself, trying to come to her senses and start a new day. Seeing Apollo, he greets him cheerfully and loudly with a good morning. Looking at him carefully, she immediately notices his condition, and, with concern in her voice, points to the dark circles under his eyes. Apollo tries to answer something incoherently, embarrassed. The girl reproachfully says that it's time for him to stop torturing himself like this. To distract her and lift her spirits, the hero, with a joyful cry, decides to show her something interesting. He repeats enthusiastically, insistently offering to take a look at his find. Apollo, finally, when the girl, succumbing to his persistence, agreed to look, turns around and begins to cast a spell. A wave of energy came from his hand. Apollo is focused on showing Luna the results of his training. Luna, watching his display of power, presses her hands to her chest and beams with admiration. The protagonist, having finished the demonstration, looks at Luna with a relieved smile, pleased that he was able to show her this. But now Luna is sleeping in her bed, and he understood that he would not be able to save the moon if it needed help. He clenches his fist, and his gaze becomes firm and determined again. Apollo continues training, his movements becoming even more refined and powerful. He is completely absorbed in the process. His face during training does not express anger, but absolute concentration and will. The training has a clearly defined goal. He is definitely strong in setting a task and executing it. The guy's actions during training are not accompanied by any emotions, only pure concentration and calculation. Apollo is one of the 1% who is capable of incredible persistence, even though it is difficult. They may be happy while they are busy with work, however. Apollo feels nothing, not at all, realizing that his power is emotionless, and perhaps that is its peculiarity. After stopping training, he makes a short, deliberate sound, as if he had understood something. He tries to concentrate again, to summon his power, but instead only sounds are heard that indicate his fatigue. Another failed attempt, accompanied by a disappointed sigh. Apollo freezes in place, his gaze becoming empty and detached. He is completely immersed in his thoughts, trying to find a solution. The man appeared again and watched quietly, deciding to approach the problem. He shouts in the guy's face to see if he can hear him. The man persistently and mockingly addresses him, trying to bring him out of his stupor. Suddenly, Apollo fell into the abyss. He lay on the ground, frightened, looking straight ahead. Apollo comes to and recognizes the man in the red cloak, to which he replies that he was the one who gave birth to his power. But now something is wrong. Apollo asks again, confused, and the man explains that he has passed the first stage, and now he faces a new obstacle. The man confirms his words, and then, with a grin, calls Apollo a thorn in his side for his stubbornness and difficulty. Shrugging, the man in the cloak muses out loud that he hasn't met such a stubborn person in a long time. Apollo, not listening to him, cries out in despair that he will not be able to protect the moon when needed. Hearing this, the man raises his eyebrows with interest. After a pause, he says that there is a sure but risky way to overcome this barrier. He looks at Apollo and asks the key question, asks what to do, offering him to make a choice. Once again, the image of Luna sleepily muttering a morning greeting to herself, trying to come to her senses and start a new day appeared. Apollo greets us again with a cheerful and loud good morning. Looking at him carefully, she immediately notices his condition and, with concern in her voice, points to the dark circles under his eyes. And again Apollo, embarrassed, tries to answer something incoherently. The girl reproachfully says that it's time for him to stop torturing himself like this. Holding out his hands, he offers to look at something, and he wants to show Luna his strength again. Again he holds out his hand, hoping for magic, and it seems to be working for him. Again the same picture. The girl looked at it all in surprise. So Apollo, full of determination, begs the man to teach him. He begins training. He showed him a new technique, which the guy was now demonstrating to the girl. Apollo, with a joyful and enlightened look, explains to Luna his discovery that he can use magic when he wants to protect her. Luna, hearing this, opens her eyes wide in surprise. She remains touched by his words. The hero, full of enthusiasm and determination, confidently declares that he will definitely save her with magic. Luna, carefully observing his gestures, asks the practical question, why the ring finger of his left hand? Apollo, with a slight smile, gives a romantic explanation, because this finger symbolizes eternity. The old man's words came to mind. He set a condition on the ring finger. He would be able to summon Levitine to save the girl. Apollo, whose face shows complete understanding, joyfully exclaims that he understands everything. Then he told the hero that this finger symbolizes eternity. The moon looks a little confused against the backdrop of all this. The next morning, Apollo receives an official message from the guild office. He was taken by Luna. Finally, they got out into the city. Luna, seeing that Apollo is getting ready in his usual simple clothes, tells him with a slight reproach that the meeting is with someone important. Luna firmly states that you need to dress appropriately so that you are not looked down upon as a country bumpkin. Luna takes the guy to a clothing store. Looking at the building, the protagonist notices that it looks quite expensive. The door opened unexpectedly and Luna was almost knocked off her feet. The guy immediately reacted and wanted to protect the girl. She had almost fallen. On his left hand, around the ring finger, a magical symbol appears briefly. An arrogant townsman rudely addresses Apollo, calling him a country bumpkin. Luna, standing up for the guy, begins to object with indignation, but Apollo himself calmly stops her. As they walk away, the bully continues to grumble, but Apollo, ignoring him, gently tells the girl to just forget about it. The townsman remains standing by the cart. An elegant girl with long hair enters. They greet her respectfully, saying words of gratitude for visiting them, introducing a new important person. Apollo passed by, not immediately noticing Lady Astria. She catches a glimpse of Apollo in the distance. Something about him catches her attention. Having got ready to leave, the lady said that she had to go already, and she asked to follow the guys. In the meantime, they walked around the city. Luna ate her sandwich with greedy appetite. She was angry at the guy, saying that this was not the way to talk to customers. A large man was about to pass by her, but something went wrong and the cup of coffee he was holding flew straight at the girl. Apollo reacted in a second and used his abilities. Everything around seemed to freeze. Everything that could have ended up on the moon ended up on the guy. He was glad that the girl was okay. She in turn pointed her finger at him. Someone, looking at them, said that it was a nightmare. It was Lady Astria, asking for forgiveness. She apologized for the inconvenience, which her servant brought while he was scratching the back of his head. She knelt down before the protagonist. She removed the cup from his head and asked him to let her make amends. Luna and Apollo looked at her in surprise. Now they found themselves in front of a tall, beautiful building. The servant met them with the lady and said that her return had been expected. They came closer, face to face, leaning down to quietly tell him not to dare embarrass her. He heard her and invited the guests to come through. The servants offered to take Mr. Apollo inside. With a smile on his face, the hero was escorted to another room, where he could change clothes. Luna was offered to settle down here while waiting for the guy. Lady Astria watched all this and was glad. She said that Apollo was wonderful. Luna was wary of these words. Realizing what she had just heard, Luna became angry and asked again. The lady said that he did protect the girl, and he did it all so easily. She continued to say that the guy stopped the tea with magic so that it wouldn't spill, and praised him for his quick reaction. The moon glowed from these words. She absolutely agreed. She said that she knew all this. Apollo was so cool. She was sure that he would soon become great. In the village, everyone made fun of Apollo. And although Luna said he was talented, no one listened. And finally, Luna decided to add that I met someone who understands how amazing he is. The lady asked why, if he was such a skilled magician, he still didn't hold any post. The girl replied that they had only arrived in the city yesterday and were now waiting for the mayor to return. Astria looked at her thoughtfully. Everyone who heard it couldn't believe she said it. The mayor was Mr. Amos. She considered it an undue disregard on his part to keep a promising magician waiting. When the lady ordered that the mayor be told that she would wait for him until sunset, Luna looked at him in surprise. Then I asked her, she is from a rich family. Astria replied that she would find out soon, but for now she asked him to tell her more about himself. Various stories with Apollo came to mind, and Luna told Astria everything, mentioning every detail, as if a parent were talking about their child. During the conversation, the teapot was filled twice, and all the cakes were eaten. With her mouth full, Luna finished another story. Lady Astria thanked the girl, and there was a reason for that. The answer to Luna's question, the reason for what, took place at an empty table. Astria decided to talk to Apollo, and when she saw his face, the girl was terribly surprised. The lady noticed a determination in his eyes, something that doesn't happen to those who live meaninglessly. Then the culprit of their conversations arrived, and it was clear from Luna's face that she was stunned by his appearance. Apollo was in a hurry and apologized for the wait. Lady Astria immediately offered her assistance. The staff was already holding a mirror up to them. Astria invited the hero to look at herself, but the guy himself did not expect this. The lady whispered in his ear to imagine him protecting what was most precious to him. Naturally, the image of the moon appeared before him. For him, she was the most dear and valuable person. Astria still stood next to Apollo as he concentrated. The guy was determined to carry out his task of protecting this girl. Now he looked a little stern and serious. Luna was shocked at how much better looking the hero had become. She thought maybe it was some kind of magic. The lady replied that nothing of the sort could have happened. Apollo himself contributed to his own transformation just by thinking about it. The girl found this logical and was very happy for the guy. She continued that there was something wonderful about Apollo. He just didn't know how to use it yet. A subordinate of Lady Astria ran into the room. She was informed that Mayor Amos had arrived. Luna was excited that they would finally be able to meet him. The mayor was already on his way to meet the trio. He said that he had been hunting, but her messenger insisted that he come. Astria asked him directly if he was going to decide about Apollo. The mayor didn't seem to understand what Apollo was. He looked confused. Lady Astria introduces Apollo and Luna to the mayor. The mayor reacted ambiguously to this acquaintance. Astria explained that Apollo had a problem measuring his magical powers. The mayor was smiling broadly as he said that his deputy had reported this to him. Now the mayor understood who Apollo was. Astria was displeased because Amos had neglected this issue. She explained that attracting talented magicians is part of the country, so what could be more important than that? He tried to justify himself, saying there were all sorts of foreign affairs and much more. He fell at her feet, asking for forgiveness, saying that he was truly sorry. He even shouted that he swears by his father. His face turned angry when Luna said that there was such a fuss here. Everyone wanted to inform him urgently. He turned away and ordered her to be silent. Everything is just as she said, the one who doesn't even understand politics at all. He added that, to tell the truth, he could explain everything. Then Lady Astria poked him in the chin, sternly calling his name. She asked if he understood what he was saying. The next second, Amos fell to his knees guiltily, only now admitting that he was guilty. He begged for mercy. Astria didn't want to listen to him. She said that he could go. Apollo and Luna were close all the time. All that was left for Mayor Amos to do was serve out the remainder of his term as he should. A passing servant slightly touched the mayor, so that he almost fell. The boys whispered among themselves, maybe Miss Astria was not in the mood. She thought that it would probably be up to her to direct Apollo where he needed to go. She believed that the guy deserved more recognition. This outcome pleased and surprised both Luna and Apollo. Sitting at a round table, Astria's proposal to visit her home was discussed. She invited them, if the guys have time, of course. Luna immediately perked up. She liked the idea. She was already looking forward to telling more stories to the lady over a cup of tea. She really wanted to go. Apollo replied that if Luna wanted to, then they would go. Lady Astria was very happy, and replied that she would prepare everything immediately. The girl decided to ask the hero if he really wouldn't ask why she wanted to go so much. Answering her own question, she said, because it was the first time she had met someone like her. Apollo was even a little embarrassed by such revelations. She remarked that Apollo was beautiful. That's exactly who he was. The girl could talk to Astria about him. Luna also announced that the lady would introduce them to those who recognized his abilities. This beautiful city, upon which the morning sun was shining. A coachman with a cart was approaching. Apollo and Luna were riding here, talking about how strange it was to go out of town. Astria said that it was true. She doesn't live here. After all, her father is very protective of her. That's why they live in this quiet and safe area. Seeing the buildings from afar, Luna asked if the lady lived there. She replied that this was indeed her home. The two guys were shocked. They didn't expect such an answer. How could this whole city be her home? But it was so. Astria's estate appeared before them. Looking at all this, Apollo wondered who Miss Astria was. She said she was just an ordinary girl who just liked Apollo. They had already entered the territory of Astria's estate. The boys couldn't take their eyes off the beauty of this city. The guy decided to ask about the people here. He asked, because they are not residents here. That was true. They were all her servants. Apollo burst out laughing. Luna's mouth dropped open in surprise. Then it dawned on the girl, and she decided to ask if Miss Astria was really a princess. Astria giggled and replied, of course not. It's just that her father spoils her a lot. Here they are already at the main building of the city. A fountain was proudly displayed on the site. The servants greeted my lady sincerely. The lady ordered that everything be arranged for the guests, pointing to Apollo and Luna. Themis replied that she would make preparations in the western part of the estate, and what was happening in the northern territory, just beyond the outer walls. The servant whispered to the miss. After all, a magical beast appeared there, so now that part was guarded. He was fierce and therefore bound with chains. The entrance to it was sealed with the help of magic. Behind the doors he roared from the magic directed at him. But not all magic worked on him. He was resistant to many forces. The lady understood that nothing could be done about it now and simply thanked Themis. Luna wanted to ask a question, so she raised her right hand up. She clarified that it was the same magical beast. Is this really the monster that attacks people? Astria confirmed that this is indeed the name for monsters that feed on humans. In this case, the girl pulled the main character forward, saying that Apollo would defeat him. The lady and Themis looked at the two of them with confusion. Luna tried to persuade the guy, convincing him that they should properly thank Miss Astria. Astria herself seemed to be waiting for Apollo to agree. However, she herself said that she appreciates it, but cannot allow it, because he is a guest. Luna claimed that she simply had to see how cool Apollo could be. Then the lady, with a soft smile on her face, replied that Apollo could act. The guy himself was a little scared, but Luna's support gave him strength. Apollo found himself in a difficult situation. After all, Levitine on the ring finger of his left hand could only be used to protect the girl. What should he do now? Luna's laughter popped into his head. Seeing his torment, Astria asked if everything was okay. He clenched his fist, wanting to appear determined to win. Luna also noticed that the hero was deep in thought and was waiting for his decision. This time, the main character wasn't sure if he could cope. In the area with the beast, they were still trying to tame it. He had very thick skin that was difficult to pierce. Apollo's thoughts were only for the moon, so he shouted, "Rely on him." He promised that he would defeat that beast. Everyone was in anticipation. The beast seemed to already sense that someone unfamiliar would come to him. The guy started to act. Monsters are divided into 4 types, depending on what they eat. The first are herbivores, which eat only plants. The second are carnivores, living off the meat of animals, and non-feeding ones, capable of existing without food and water. And finally, the most ferocious of all are the cannibals. They thirst for human flesh and blood. The worst plague of all, that's why they gave it its name. They began to call them magical beasts. These animals were of enormous size and had a very terrible voice. Astria and her guests were escorted by guards. Now Apollo thought that he wouldn't succeed. He looked at his finger and realized that he hadn't used magic for a long time. Luna decided to check if everything was okay. The guy had no face. He kept wondering if he could fight. Then they shouted at him to believe in himself. It was a girl. She claimed that then magic would definitely appear. She supported him in every possible way, shouting Apollo's name. Then the guy himself understood that he had no choice but to believe in himself. The monster's eyes glittered brightly and disgustingly against the dark background of his face. The magicians removed the seal from the entrance to let in those who arrived. They heard Lady Astria's order and obediently carried it out. As soon as they removed the seal, the gate began to move. And then everyone saw the beast's crazy eyes. He wanted to break free from these shackles. He screamed and howled at the damned people looking at him. The guards warned that his skin was too thick to deal a fatal blow. It looked like they were in here for a long time. Apollo couldn't even imagine how he would fight him. He didn't understand how he could defeat such a magical beast. He was shocked at how calmly the moon reacted to everything. This crazy girl walked towards the beast with a smile on her face. The hero was seriously scared for this crazy girl. She answered him that now she would show everyone what he was capable of. So I ran straight to the monster's lair, and she didn't care that it was very dangerous. Suddenly the magic of restriction weakened and the chains fell from the beast. At that very second, Apollo was no longer in the place where he had been standing. He was already holding Luna in his arms, saving her from this terrible beast. He rushed away from him at incredible speed. Then he started to spin the girl. He let her go and stayed to fight the beast. He used the 10 breaths hand sword with the help of the ring on his ring finger, and he defeated the monster. And he himself was already carrying his hand away from him in his arms. Everyone was stunned as to how he was able to put the beast down so quickly, and all with one blow. Astria couldn't believe it all. A slight blush shone on her cheeks. Luna held Apollo tightly and gratefully in her arms. From the beast's perspective, they looked as if they were standing facing a bright light. When asked if she was okay, the girl replied that of course everything was fine. The guy also clarified that she made it so that he could use the 10 swords technique, which is exactly what she wanted. Despite the fact that she was in danger, the girl was confident that the main character would save her. That was for sure. The beast was still lying prostrate on the ground and seemed to have no intention of getting up. Apollo was ready to defend the moon no matter what it cost him. It was sacred to him. The top of Astria's mansion was visible at this spot. Astria herself spoke to the guy, saying that she couldn't believe that he was able to bring down the beast alone. Yes, and lead with one more blow. She was perplexed. Then Luna, holding Apollo's hand, repeated that this is how strong he is. The lady thought, his strength is on par with a 3rd-level mage, if not more. Luna still continued to praise the guy. She was sure that he would become even cooler. Astria asked again if the hero really had anything else to show. The girl replied that there was still the most powerful magic of the sacred sword. Meanwhile, the guards approached the beast to check what was wrong with it. The guy was more serious at that moment than ever. The magical beast stood up and quickly soared into the sky. It was aimed at these people who dared to put it down. But first he looked at Lady Astria. At that moment Apollo's power didn't work. He got scared. It was all because she was not Luna. Then Apollo decided to put himself in the wrong place instead of miss. She flew away, while the hero was in the mouth of the magical beast, groaning from incredibly strong pain. Together with him, the monster flew up again. Everyone tried to do something, to somehow protect the master. But everything was to no avail. Thick blood flowed down the protagonist's face without stopping. An inner voice told him to destroy them all. He didn't understand what kind of voices these were, whose they were, but he heard them again and again, and it was as if strength had returned to his body. He grabbed something tightly with his fingers. I woke up already hanging in the air, spread out in different directions. Now he had magic on all the fingers of his left hand, and was ready to attack right now. He rushed at high speed towards the magical beast. The only thing in his head was to destroy them all. He dealt a fatal blow to the beast, which was accompanied by a scream from the monster. Astria and the guard watched this with their mouths open. The lady's face was bruised from the fall, and she herself was frightened. Apollo wanted to finish off the beast, so he used his strength to the fullest. From the strain, scarlet blood was still flowing from his mouth and nose. The magical beast fell down, powerless. The main character screamed, trying to inflict as much damage as possible on this brute. In the end, this guy completely destroyed him. Apollo walked all ragged, rumpled, pale. He was completely exhausted. However, there was no sign of fatigue in his eyes, only pride and relief. Luna pointed her finger at the hero, calling him by name. She saw that his hair had grown, and it was as if he had grown up on his own. He didn't look like himself, but she was still very happy, because she thought that he had died completely. Lady Astria thanked Apollo for risking his life for me. He said that it just happened to him somehow, but the changes in appearance were not due to his powers. This was the first time something like this had happened. Suddenly, a web of energy spread out from his hand. The magic activated on its own. Luna, with tears in her eyes, grabbed her head, not understanding what was happening. The hero felt a surge of power. The sensations were not the same as before. He could not control them. The power was completely beyond his control. The 10 Breaths hand sword was activated. Because he couldn't control it, he inadvertently began to destroy everything around him. The escorts tried to cover themselves, swore, and did not understand what was happening. Luna hid behind the shield and asked Apollo to do something quickly. He replied that he was trying, but it was of little help. Then Luna offered to pull the power back to him. He liked this idea and decided to try to do it. Here he is already lying on the ground, trying to catch his breath from the struggle with himself. The girls immediately ran up to him and started examining him to make sure nothing had happened to him. Apollo himself only asked if they were okay. He asked for communication, which put them in danger. The girls thought he wasn't to blame, but the lady said he had saved them all. Luna wanted to help the guy get up, while Astria again said words of gratitude for the victory over the magical beast. The main character broke into a smile. Miss Astria looked at Apollo with special tenderness and warmth. They sat like that for some time. Luna decided to ask Apollo again how he was feeling. He wanted to answer something with a joyful look, but the girl interrupted him and said that she was hungry. It turned out that the guy wanted the same thing. The lady promised that she would definitely treat them. At that very moment, the servant announced that everything was ready. Now Lady Astria decided to admit that she really loves to eat. While the girls were discussing what they liked to eat, Apollo sheepishly said that he was already hungry. A man in armor on a horse was racing towards them. He stopped next to the talking girls. He knelt down, introduced himself, and apologized for being late. Luna asked Astria who it was. The lady replied that she wanted to introduce them all. That's why I invited him here. Luna noticed the gem on his helmet and pointed it out to Apollo. This stone brought back memories of the village. When they were children, a lord came to the village. The guys were very interested in watching, so they broke through the crowd. There were also gems on the lord's hat then. This means that this man was an important person, since he had 2 of them on his helmet. But he worshipped Lady Astria, so who was she then? The lady began to introduce the instructor Bernard Apollo, who possessed outstanding abilities. Then Bernard stood up to come over and introduce himself. Standing next to him, I replied that it was very nice to meet you. The hero thought to himself that he was a nice young man. The instructor turned to Astria and asked if Apollo could demonstrate his talents. When Bernard asked what kind of magic he specialized in, the hero answered that his magic wasn't exactly magic. The instructor didn't want to waste a lot of time. He wanted to see everything with his own eyes. He set up an indestructible magical barrier of wisteria, a test to measure skills. The man waited tensely for the main character to take action. Looking at all this, the moon had a bad feeling. But it seems Apollo had everything under control. Now he decided to use the 10 Breaths hand sword, from which the instructor looked as if enchanted. This energy could knock him off his feet. He tried to hold the barrier, but he knew things were bad. Bernard still flew away from Apollo's power. He pulled his sword back sharply, leaving a strong mark on the ground. The instructor turned around and couldn't believe what had just happened. He looked at the main character with some caution. He began to rise a little. The power was so amazing that it broke through not only the layer of earth, but also part of the wall. Apollo still stood in his stance, as if waiting for more tests. Wisteria was a school that specialized in defensive magic, founded by Anton Wisteria. For many years he served the emperor, guarding him and ensuring his safety. After the death of the emperor, Anton returned to his homeland and founded a school. At one time, Wisteria Castle became a place where over 1,000 people worked and studied. And so Wisteria's highest achievement is an indestructible magical barrier. The greatest protective spell created by the founder Anton. It was never broken in his entire life. Emperor Bernard, he is a second-class mage. He is a skilled wizard who has mastered the barrier of the Wisteria school. and yet it was destroyed. Bernard could not understand how. He wanted to turn back with an angry look. Lady Astria stood behind him. She looked pleased and proud that Apollo had proven her words. The instructor asked who her lover was. She laughed, saying that they weren't in that kind of relationship yet. They stood there in awkward silence for a while. Bernard thought that this girl would never tell him what was on her mind. He would have to find out everything himself. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a woman's scream. It was Luna who was praising Apollo, saying how cool he was. The guy smiled sweetly and replied that it was good that at least the power hadn't gotten out of control. Astria confirmed that he was a promising guy. Bernard was truly surprised, so he bowed as a sign of respect. The lady had no doubt at all. She was very lucky. And all because the mayor put his case off until later. Many mayors who possess magic end up becoming intoxicated with power. The instructor thought about her words. The servant asked if she could take them there. Luna was very much in favor, because she was so hungry. Astria and Bernard were left a little behind alone. The instructor said he hoped the official procedure would take place as soon as possible. The lady asked again if he meant promoting the boy to the 4th grade or higher. He answered positively and asked whether he really had that much power. Apollo and Luna were happily heading off to have a meal. Miss Astria watched them very warmly. There was admiration in her eyes. When the lady said that it was necessary to start in the 9th grade, the man could not believe his ears. He asked her again if she was really sure about this, to which Astria replied that everything was perfect. While Bernard was straining himself, asking why the lowest level, Miss seemed not to hear him. But he still tried to get an answer to his question. Didn't she want to help that guy rise in rank? However, the question still remained open. The lady was thinking about something, but she herself said that Apollo is like an uncut diamond. One suddenly said that if one tried to assess his potential, anything could happen. Bernard crouched down to assess the force of his blow once more. And he added that the hero is 1 in 100,000, even higher than that. A true diamond in the rough, to harm someone like him would be a crime. They discussed this as they headed back to the mansion. The lady continued that if Apollo was considered Astria's favorite, his merits would be devalued. Then the instructor understood why she was saying to start with the lowest class. Bernard felt ashamed that he had made a mistake in his judgment. Therefore, to atone for his guilt, he was ready to take on his training. Astria agreed, as long as there was nothing to find fault with him about. Raising her hand to the sky, the lady instructed the instructor to train properly. Meanwhile, Luna and Apollo collapsed onto the diva with relief. The dinner was so delicious. But Astria also offered to drink tea. While the servants poured tea and prepared desserts, the boys sincerely thanked Lady Astria. Luna wanted to ask Miss something else. She was interested in what Apollo's results were. Astria completely forgot to tell about this. She said that Apollo was now a 9th grade mage, and the guy was stunned. Luna, with tears of happiness in her eyes, began to squeal that Apollo had finally become a magician. Astria informed that the documents should arrive in a couple of days. Then he would be able to complete the 9th level tasks, by which time the tea had already gotten cold. But for now, it was necessary to prepare housing and slaves for the hero. The pretty girl looked at Apollo without looking away. The guy stood in shock. What a slave this was. It turned out that these 2 girls were already his slaves. Luna wondered what was wrong with the guy. He just didn't like the idea. Astria said that Apollo was right. Even today, owning slaves without good reason can be frowned upon by people around. The hero was stunned when the lady ordered him to adjust the collars so that Apollo could see them. They were needed for printing. If for some reason the owner no longer wants to keep the slave, the next one is put, explained Miss. Luna asked if a slave had multiple seals. It was a kind of indicator of how skilled you were. Apollo noted that this meant that he was able to shelter those whom others had rejected. One of the slaves put tea on the guy and asked him to enjoy it while it was hot. Astria was incredibly surprised by the protagonist's thinking. Keep slaves not to show off your influence, but to help them. Seeing the lady's expression, Apollo asked if he had said anything wrong. But everything was like that. Miss Astria simply considered Apollo to be very kind. Bringing the cup to his lips, the guy was surprised, really. The slaves fussed around the 2 boys. In the morning at Astria's mansion, Luna walked down the stairs happily. She was in a great mood and wished good morning to everyone she met. But then she came across a girl with a tail. And not just one, there was a whole line of them. When she saw Miss Astria, the girl learned that these were slaves who had not yet been handed over to anyone. The main character approached them in new clothes. Luna immediately began to praise Apollo, saying that he was becoming more and more handsome every day. Astria showed Apollo the slaves she had told him about yesterday and asked him to choose. He thought about it because he had to choose from those who belonged to Miss Astria. Luna was asking the lady if she gave him her slaves, she wouldn't seem like the one who couldn't support them. Astria replied that thanks to the influence of her family, this would not happen. While Luna was pondering the answer, The hero was thinking about how to choose. Astria said that it would not cause any harm to her family, but that was not all. Sometimes the highest aristocrats exchange slaves among themselves. They send slaves to each other to build strong cooperation. If political marriage is a union, then the exchange of slaves is a kind of conditional union. For some, this is a relationship above friendship, but below an alliance, almost a political marriage. Now Apollo had to choose the one he wanted. Themis suspected something was wrong, why the lady was so indulgent to the hero. She was very angry and thought that this guy did not realize how lucky he was. After all, he is Miss Astria's favorite. The guy stood with his hand at his chin and didn't understand how to choose. The moon immediately told him, by the quality of their butts. The guy felt very awkward, because the girl asked the slaves to show their butts, and the skirts needed to be lifted too. And of course they did it. Apollo immediately turned away and wanted to stop it all. Luna explained this by saying that strong legs, and especially the butt, are important for hard work. This is also important for Apollo, because he used to swing his hammer like that. Then it dawned on the guy that buttocks really are important. Now he considered it right, and began to examine it together with the girl. They examined one after another. Later it got to the point where they started to feel them up. From such conversations, Themis turned as red as a beet. Miss Asria looked a little upset. This really irritated the maid. Apollo remained in thought for a few more minutes. Actually, just like the moon. Then Astria decided to come to their aid, although she said that she didn't really understand this. She said that if a person gains and loses weight in these areas, there will be consequences. She heard that some lines appear, and she decided to demonstrate this on one of the slaves. Themis was already standing there completely out of her mind, unable to understand what the lady was doing. To survive the winter, workers work hard and stock up on food. During the winter, these reserves are eaten, and in the spring, people again begin to prepare for the cold by making reserves. Apollo understood everything. Slaves who perform such work get such lines on their buttocks. Luna asked if Astria also chose slaves in this way, to which the lady replied that if she has to choose them herself, she will focus on this. She sent her maid to fetch the hourglass. Themis didn't keep us waiting long. This is a tool that determines whether a person is similar to the one you are looking for. Apollo took this magical device into his hand. Astria, for example, also said that she was looking for someone who would satisfy her thirst for knowledge, and touched him with this thought. Everything around her began to blur, and sand appeared in the hourglass. The lady handed the watch over to one of the slaves, and they started to light up and the sand stopped. It was amazing. Themis explained that the amount of sand that falls will determine whether the person is close to the one you are looking for. In this case, it meant that he was not the one who could satisfy Miss Asteria's thirst for knowledge. Apollo asked if it could be magic too, and he himself confirmed his suspicions. The watch is made in such a way that even people who do not use magic can use it without any problems. But Astria replied that there are no people in the world who lack magic at all. So if the magic is equal to even 1 grain of sand, everything is fine. Because of this, Luna asked the hero to try too. When he touched the watch, it glowed blue in his hands. The guy assumed that they were faulty because there was no sand in them. The lady replaced his watch and gave him a new one. He thought, his magic power is actually at 0. What will happen if Miss Astria finds out? The watch didn't respond at all, no matter how hard the main character tried. He was ready to fall through the ground. Why didn't he have any mania at all? He suddenly remembered the man in the cloak, but he still continued to stand firmly on the surface. The lady spoke to Themis about exchanging this watch, and it looks like the warranty period has not expired. Their conversation was interrupted by Apollo. He was already ready to tell how everything really was. It was very difficult to decide on this, because he did not know what Miss's reaction would be. But he still blurted out in one breath that there is no magical power. His scream gave way to a ringing silence. But it didn't last long. Deli said again that Apollo was so kind. She said that he is someone who has amazing skills. His strength definitely cannot be 0. Luna chose the right moment, grabbed the guy's hand and said that everything was right. Why did he scare her so much? Lady Astria bowed her head slightly and apologized for the malfunction of those devices. Looking at the beautiful view from the window, Miss said that she herself does not really use them. All because she considered it a kind of indulgence. She didn't want to rely on magic. She liked to evaluate people herself. The hero asked if she could evaluate things this way. She answered positively and was thus able to meet a wonderful man, hinting at Apollo himself. It was already getting dark. A group of slaves gathered around the table and listened to Luna. The main character couldn't understand why everyone was running around like that. I left my room to check out the situation. He walked by, looking closely at the people, still not understanding what was going on. The weather outside looked as if a storm was about to hit. Luna and Miss Astria called Apollo to come to them. He asked why the servants were so busy. It was all because of the storm of magical power. It is a natural disaster that disrupts magical powers. making the use of magic impossible. Since mania will be unavailable during the storm, they rush to prepare magical devices to protect the estate. Astria, looking at the rising storm, apologized for the noise. So, there won't be any mania yet. But even at such a moment, Apollo should be able to protect the moon. Suddenly Apollo made a magic pillar in his hand, and he said he just wanted to check that he could still cast the spell. The lady suddenly screamed and covered her mouth with her hands. Even the moon was frightened by Lady Astria's reaction. She didn't understand how one could use mania in the moment of a storm of magical power. She admired him very much. The storm grew stronger and stronger. Luna turned to Apollo with a thought. She has a feeling that the spell worked even better than last time. I asked him to repeat it again. It wasn't difficult. The amount of magical energy grew rapidly and the shape also changed. Astria also confirmed this, adding that it looked brighter and clearer. Apollo realized that this was the power of reason, and she grew, and suddenly an old man appeared. The force of reason could not be broken even in the midst of a storm. The hero looked convulsively at the old man in the cloak, while Luna heard some other noise besides the storm. The lady looked out the window and just said, "I thought it was them." These hyenas decided to come visit again. Thugs who attack people during storms when magic is unavailable. They are deliberately taking advantage of the disaster, but so far the knights have held them back. Luna extended her fist forward, inviting Apollo to suppress them. The guy liked this idea, because if they were not broken, he would not be able to protect the moon. Miss Astria did not dare to interfere. Rather, she was very glad. Luna saw the main character off, hoping that everything would work out for him. There was a massacre going on outside. The hyenas laughed at the knights, saying that they had no magic anyway, and since they can't use it, they have nothing to fear from Astria's estate. One of the hyenas noticed Apollo approaching them, and he rushed at him, saying that he could easily cut him to pieces. But at the same second he flew back several meters. The main character replied that he would not allow them to do whatever they wanted, and he took the sword of the accumulation of heavenly clouds. The crowd of hyenas thought that this was all nonsense and the guy was bluffing, so one after another they went after him. Apollo rushed into the attack without a drop of fear. Having good training, he managed to dodge and avoid their blows. The hyenas wanted him dead, but all they could do was die themselves. Apollo launched several upwards. An impressive-sized barrel with a wick was ready to fly at the hero. However, nothing worked out again. Apollo was able to let this attack pass him by. It exploded before it even reached the ground. The hyenas still wouldn't calm down. They were crawling from everywhere. Apollo fought alone against them all. But even the whole group was pushed back with the help of his strength. He extended his hand towards the sky, summoning a huge pillar of energy. That's why everything around turned into chaos. Next came the huge hammer. The main character asked with a sly smile who would be next. When everyone had scattered and the street was already safe, Astria and Luna ran out. Luna ran, enthusiastically shouting the guy's name. He turned away at the sound of her voice, his sword and hammer still in his hand. She hung around his neck and said that he was magnificent as always. Lady Astria watched them, adjusting her unruly hair in the wind. The storm was in full swing, but he used magic and even forced the enemy to retreat. Although there were indeed a lot of enemies, and although the storm had not yet died down, the weather outside was already acceptable. Astria remembered that she had something important to do. Therefore, she had to leave the guests. She whispered to her subordinate that she was quite sure about something. The man replied that the place the lady had pointed to was under the jurisdiction of the first-rank governor of Spica. Miss sat down to write to him right away and ordered him to prepare the horse. She asked to do this despite all the risks. The servant understood her and left. The messenger rushed at full speed with the letter from Lady Astria. Soon I arrived at the place, at the barracks of Admiral Spica. The person who met him was surprised that the letter was from Lady Mijo. Before he could dismount his horse, the messenger fell exhausted to the ground, but was still able to speak and take it to Admiral Spike. Here the knight stands opposite the admiral and awaits instructions. He began to read the letter that had been brought to him recently. The leader of the Scarlet Knights, Admiral Spica Austin. Here is his full introduction. He gave this letter to his servant to read, who looked at it, trying to think about the words. A recommendation was written for someone in the 9th grade to operate in the city of Cheese Ace. It is a remote place where a storm of magical power rages for more than a third of the year. There is an area within the Admiral's jurisdiction where a storm of magical power has been raging for almost half a year. The servant asked if Austin was really going to send a 9th grade mage there. The two of them wondered why Miss Astria had written this. The Admiral assumed that it was most likely because she was not indifferent to him. Even in a region where magic can't be used for 6 months, he'll still be able to do something. Austin reasoned that she didn't wait and sent a messenger, which meant she was ready to kill him from fatigue just to deliver the message. The messenger lay on the cold, damp ground, covered only by his cloak. Admiral Speak Austin, holding the letter in his hands, decided that he wanted to take a look at the person the lady had written about. A conversation took place at Astria's estate. The admiral's servant brought a reply letter from his master. It was an order of appointment. The red-haired man added that His Excellency the Governor asked me to convey something. He apologizes that he couldn't come and talk in person, as the skeleton dragon is currently active. Miss was surprised that it was already activated. Reese, the skeleton dragon, is an evil dragon whose fury surpasses all others, and he is the one who never dies. In the end, there was nothing left but to seal him. But this is not enough. He awakens once a year, and during the period of activity, the governor is obliged to strengthen the seal, which is what he did, trying to order the dragon to behave decently. And so far, everything was going well for him. Astria asked me to convey that she appreciates his concern. She decided to go out for a walk on the property, accompanied by a servant who protected her from the scorching sun with an umbrella. Apollo was training at this time. Luna stared at him without taking her eyes off him. The lady, passing by the boys, said that it seemed like Luna was doing well, but Apollo didn't look well. He explained that he couldn't use magic properly, although everything worked fine yesterday. Luna suggested that Apollo would find it easier to use magic during a magical storm. Astria thought about it. Apollo asked her if this was possible. She replied that it was not usually given as real, but if it could be true. Luna asked what then, if it was possible. The lady said this means Apollo really is amazing. Luna repeated her words and confirmed them, encouraging the guy. And that is why Astria wanted to offer the hero some work. This was the very same official order of appointment to the Delos region. Luna raised her hands in joy that she would finally have work. But the lady added some bad news. Storms are common in Delos. Apparently there are many magical beasts there. His task is to deal with them and control the region. Perhaps this is where he can find answers to his questions. Lady Astria hoped that he would be able to demonstrate even greater strength. Luna, taking Apollo by the hand, asked him what he needed to try. The guy, of course, agreed with her. They looked at each other with such a pure, tender gaze, Astria admired them. The carriage arrived at its destination. The coachman asked my lady for forgiveness for waiting, and did so on one knee. Opening the door, Apollo and Luna were invited inside. Entering there, Apollo found himself in some large room. The lady, wagging her finger, explained that it was all thanks to magic. They set off on their journey in comfort. Driving away from the huge Astria estate, they passed forests and rivers, and voices could be heard in the carts. Lady Astria explained that the reason why the space inside the carriage differs from its appearance is distortion magic. Mages who wield this magic are usually divided into 3 levels, with the first stage allowing the user to only create an illusion. At the next level, the magician can actually expand the space. An even higher level allows the magician to expand and stabilize space. This is Mikami Sushi, the second most powerful master of the Ladybirth style and a specialist in spatial magic. Luna, leaning out the window, repeated to herself, "It means the space inside has been expanded through magic." Back inside, she pronounced it an amazing spell. She leaned towards Apollo and asked if he could do that. With her arms spread out to both sides, she tried to demonstrate how to expand the space. Astria listened to their arguments without interfering. The guy kept insisting that he couldn't do that. But Luna said that he had already done that with that thing with his ring finger. Yes, that was it, the spell to protect the moon. She was delighted that Apollo said so. In Luna's eyes, the main character was an impeccable magician who always protected her. She helped him understand that if he did this and expanded it, then everything would work out. The hero looked at his hand and tried to figure out how this could be accomplished. He thought that he could use it in battle like this. It would also be easier to protect the moon. The moon was just flowing down the wall from Apollo. It was so cool. Having heard all this, Miss wondered whether she would be able to make such proposals to Apollo. Luna looked at the guy with embarrassment and blushed unconsciously. Apollo noticed her flushed face, causing the girl to quickly turn away and wave her hands. Suddenly, Lady Astria spoke, apologizing for interrupting them, and she informed me that it would soon be necessary to recast the spell, and suggested that I take a look at this magic. Apollo agreed without hesitation. The carriage stopped and the driver was about to get inside. He took his leave of Miss Astria and was ready to get down to business. Mikami quickly began to cast his spell. All 4 of them were inside at the time. Afterwards, we found ourselves in a luxurious hall, where the table was already set. The table quickly filled with various dishes and appetizers. The lady sat down at the table with the boys, and they began to eat. Luna gobbled everything up, saying that everything was very tasty. She offered Apollo to try what she had just taken. Day turned to night. The carts were illuminated by lanterns. Luna kept repeating how amazing it was that they were now inside the cart, but in such a luxurious hall, while the guy was catching food. While the guys were discussing how it was fashionable to live here, Astea disagreed with them. She wouldn't want to live like that. She wasn't keen on places where insects might be found. Apollo still couldn't figure out how to deal with his poor piece of meat. The knight addressed Milady remotely. He announced that there would be a magical storm all day tomorrow. And now Apollo finally managed to catch food. He was happy. The knights looked at the sky in fear. The storm was approaching, as predicted. Inside the cart there was already brewed hot tea with sweets. There was talk about an approaching storm. But if they were to end up there now, all the magic cast on the cart would disappear. Luna was very scared. She didn't want to lose all of this. Therefore, for the time being, we decided to set up camp here. Apollo and Luna watched as the rest of the crew bustled about and started a fire. The main character was deep in his thoughts. Luna quietly approached Miss Asteria. She wanted to clarify something. They were still inside the carriage, but there was also a place to take a bath. The lady asked if Luna wanted to. They could take a bath together. While the maids were tidying up the clothes, voices could be heard from the bathroom as the girls admired each other's bodies. Apollo decided to go out for a little practice at night. He tried to immerse himself completely in himself and concentrate on his powers. Suddenly a spider came down to the girls' bathroom, and the two of them were very scared. Apollo sensed that Luna was scared and rushed to help with lightning speed. The girls sat hugging each other and shook with fear. Suddenly he would descend right on them. Tears were already streaming from their eyes. The fear was so strong. The guy saw them both in the bathroom, embarrassed. He blushed and became confused. Luna jumped out of the bathroom and ran straight towards him. The main character asked the girl to wait a little. He was already using magic. Used the 10 breaths hand sword, so that the girl would not be naked in front of him. Lady Astrea was surprised that Apollo managed to expand the levitain. Then the guy was able to catch the girl in his arms. She was happy that Apollo was able to use the magical extension. He confirmed this, and was also pleased with the result. Luna asked if he could repeat it on Miss Astrea. Suddenly a lady started coming out of the bathroom, and Apollo's eyes widened. Then the guy ran away from that room, apologizing as he went. The girls were left alone, looked at each other and started laughing. The main character went on to continue training. The lady sat by the window and asked if Apollo was going to sleep now. Luna explained that if he finished training too early, he would wake up in the middle of the night and secretly go train again. Astrea concluded that this guy was very hardworking. Luna pointed her finger at the lady and confirmed that he was insanely hardworking. She was so surprised then, because he not only listened to Luna, but also immediately put the advice into action. The miss looked at the starry sky with a slight smile and said that if the cup is turned upwards, then everything is real, and if it is lowered down, it is impossible to fill it with anything. She explained that a person who does not listen to the advice of others will not succeed, which is why training in magic is called polishing the bowl. Apollo is truly amazing. Luna's eyes widened and she came very close to Astrea. She suddenly asked why Miss was treating her so well. The lady looked at her carefully, listening to her every word, and she answered the girl, placing her hand on hers, that she was also very important. After all, it is because she is here that Apollo can demonstrate his talents, no matter how good the fruits that can grow from seeds. If the farmer does not take proper care of them, the seeds will spoil. Luna repeated the lady's words. Take proper care. Astrea continued that in order for Apollo to continue to grow as a mage, her presence was necessary. The girl giggled sweetly at these words, imagining the main character. In the morning, Luna went out for a run. Apollo followed her out. The girl admired the big river. The other bank was really far away. While on the shore, they discussed that they needed to move. Luna asked where the ferry was then. Astrea asked not to worry about it. A guy came forward and assured them that what he was about to do would only take a moment. He touched the river with both hands, and everything around him was blinded by his magic, and the river instantly froze. Now they could cross it, which is what Luna and Apollo ran to do. The girl was delighted. They were really walking along the river. It was faster than on the ferry. When Luna was about to fall, the hero, as always, saved her by catching her with the help of magic. Miss Astrea was called. They wanted to report something to her. Another disaster was approaching them. A group of magical beasts rushed towards Apollo and Luna. In the heart of the city of Cheese Eyes, where it rains forever, lies the desert region of Delos, where the locals could not rely on magic. So they sent a man there to rule, and that was Apollo. They were now in the city of Kibaroi. Everyone was wearing raincoats because it was raining. The girls found funny animals and had fun with them. It turned out that there were too many of them, and when the birds flew away, the girls got scared. Everyone ran to hide behind Apollo. The residents of this city cooked their food outside in such weather. The guys discussed how few people live here, and that for the Cheese Eyes region this is normal. The lady said that once Apollo defeats the local monsters, conditions should improve. Luna encouraged the guy that he should try, yet this is not what Lady Astrea expected. She thought there would be many more residents here, but it looks like they ran out of food and had to leave. This was understandable, but Miss was still upset that Apollo would do so many great things. But not many will see this. Luna thought about this thought. After rethinking it, she said, "It is true. The main character decided that his affairs were bad. It was necessary to quickly find shelter here. The monsters were advancing. They were fast and made strange sounds. Astria ordered Shine to get rid of them quickly. It was necessary to move people in carts to a safe place." Suddenly, Apollo looked away somewhere. He felt uneasy. The guy was casting a spell trying to get rid of the monsters, channeled magic through his 2 fingers. But suddenly the energy disappeared somewhere. Shane did not understand what happened. She called Miss Astria to inform her that a magical storm had just begun. This meant that they could no longer use mania, and the monsters were getting closer. The storm drove them completely crazy. The command was given to do everything to protect Miss Astria, but Luna asked everyone to stop. After all, now it was Apollo's turn to act. She was pushing him to go. Shane looked at him, but didn't expect anything special. The boy took off his cloak, ready to fight. He used the 10 Breaths hand sword. He directed the energy directly at the magical beasts. He made a magic grid that took them all down at once. He noticed that during a storm it was indeed easier for him to cope with them. But there were a lot of them. They kept coming and coming. Then the guy took all his power in one hand and used a cluster of heavenly clouds. He could control his powers as much as he wanted. If so, he thought he could handle it. The animals flew in different directions from Apollo's energy. He made it like a whirlpool of magic. His movements were solid, practiced, his gaze focused. As Astria thought, he works alone, but he is as useful as a whole squad. The guy continued to fight hard, not noticing his fatigue. But the magical storm has not passed yet. Everyone listened to Astria's words as she spoke about Helios's dilemma. She continued, "Even today his name remained in the history of the Empire. The legendary great Helios Electo. They say he could use all kinds of magic when he was only 3. The girls were shocked that this was only 3. But he still had a weak spot. He didn't have much magical power. Apollo couldn't listen to this now. He was a little busy. A guy came to his aid. The hero thanked him for saving his skin. His strength is declining. Maybe he overexerted himself. They told him not to be afraid. They would be able to fight them. Apollo reproached himself for not having enough physical strength. Luna said if that's all it wasn't a problem. The guy barely managed to direct the wave at the beast. Or rather, I didn't have much time. He leaned on his knees to rest. He heard a scream for him to use that thing. It was Luna who was trying to guide him. She was suggesting that thing like last time. The thought of absorbing them has taken root in my head. He took one animal in his hands, raised it up above his head. He shouted loudly. What he was trying to do was not easy, and it seems he succeeded. The girls said that he had done this before. He absorbed the monster and turned it into his own power. Next, he used the 10 Breaths hand sword to create a cluster of heavenly clouds. He mentally thanked the moon for such an idea. Although Apollo was capable of the most powerful magic, he was limited by the amount of physical power available to him. He needed to absorb more monsters. And then he heard his name behind him. He looked at what they wanted from him. The group brought him even more magical beasts. Lady Astria asked to accept them. They threw a whole bunch of these monsters at him, shouting, "Catch them!" He stretched out his hand to catch everyone. Suddenly he felt pain. So much strength, like a lump in his throat, but he still had to protect the moon and the others. A large beam of magic emanated from him. Luna ran to him, asking if he was okay. The guy replied that he was generally fine. She hugged him, saying that it seemed like he would become even stronger. But it wasn't only his merit. He succeeded thanks to everyone. The storm was already beginning to move away from this place. Suddenly he felt something inside, some new feeling. It was incredibly painful. He wanted to howl, but he endured it. And most of all, he didn't want to worry the moon. She was so happy now. The servants reported that they had dealt with the remaining monsters. Apollo's pain subsided, but there was still something wrong with his body. By order of Admiral Spica, Lord Apollo, the 9th highest-ranking officer, will be responsible for the governance and defense of the city of Kabaira. This meant that the city now belonged to Apollo. Luna was delighted. It is even bigger than the village in which the hero lived. The moon told the boy that the city was now in his hands. The hero felt that pain again. He tried to endure it. The servant addressed Miss Astria. He said the weather was improving. She asked again what about the abandoned lake. The answer came immediately. He is awaiting orders. Bright sunlight streamed through the dark clouds. An old man with long hair and a beard came out to them. Lady Astria bent down to greet him. He began to cast spells. He made a magical barrier to keep the monsters out. Having done his work, he wiped his hands and left. This barrier magic that surrounds the entire city and prevents monsters from attacking is considered a secret among secrets. Its members are considered extremely important and travel to many cities. The school's motto is Abandoned Lake, turning the cities of this world, damaged by magical beasts, into oases. Luna put her hands in front of her and asked, "Is this still mania?" Is she affected by the magical storm? Astria replied that everything was as Luna had said. However, there is no need to worry. The Twilight Mirage is one of the fastest when it comes to barriers. The girl asked if he could put up as many barriers as he wanted. Apollo knew he had to quickly erect barriers. The maids were cleaning the mansion cheerfully and quickly. When they finished, they reported that all the maids worked together to clean thoroughly. Everything was shining, not a single spider remained. The guy wondered where Apollo was. Luna replied that everything was as usual with him. He was in his thoughts and training. He remembered how he protected the moon and how he could further improve himself. He was already exhausting himself. I felt that unbearable pain again. He curled up on the ground in pain. Bright scarlet blood oozed from his mouth.